Dear listener, welcome to another journey through the whispers of history, where the past comes alive like a story told by a friend. Picture yourself under a starlit sky, the air cool and quiet. Or perhaps you're nestled in the soft glow of dawn, ready to step into a world long gone. Where are you right now? Are you listening as the night wraps you in its calm, or with the first light of morning painting your room? Tonight we're traveling to ancient China, to the days of the Han Dynasty, over 2,000 years ago, when life as a peasant was a test of endurance, a tapestry woven with sweat, hope, and unrelenting struggle. Imagine waking to the scent of damp earth, your hands gripping a wooden hoe, the distant hum of a village stirring under a heavy gray sky. The Han Dynasty, from 206 before Christ to 220 after Christ, was a golden age for emperors and scholars. This is a tale of survival, of hearts that beat fiercely despite the odds, of hands that tilled the earth and built a civilization. If these journeys through time captivate you, stay with me. Let's uncover the lessons of those who came before us, their struggles and their triumphs, as we step into the world of ancient China together. But for the peasants, it was a life of brutal challenges. Their days were shaped by the land's whims, the empire's demands, and the quiet strength of their communities. In this story, we'll walk through their rice fields, feel the weight of their labor, and hear the whispers of their resilience. We'll explore how they faced floods, famines, and the unrelenting pressure of taxes and wars, yet found ways to hold on to hope. So, settle in, take a deep breath, and let the past unfold. If these stories of the past draw you in, subscribe to join me for more journeys through time. Close your eyes and imagine a vast plain under the Han Dynasty, stretching from 206 before Christ to 220 after Christ, where the air carries the damp scent of rice paddies and the faint smoke of village fires. The sun rises slowly, casting a golden haze over fields where peasants toil, their wooden hoes striking the earth with a rhythmic thud. The Han Dynasty was a time of grandeur, when the Silk Road wove distant lands together. Emperors ruled from opulent palaces, and scholars penned poetry by lamplight. But for the peasants who formed the backbone of this empire, life was a relentless struggle, a daily battle against nature's caprices and the unyielding demands of a powerful system. In scattered villages, homes of mud and straw stood humbly, their thatched roofs creaking under summer rains. The scent of burning wood filled the air at dusk, as families gathered around small fires, sharing bowls of watery millet porridge. The land they worked wasn't theirs. It belonged to nobles or the emperor, the Son of Heaven, whose divine mandate hung over every aspect of life. Peasants paid for the right to farm with their harvestress millet, wheat handing over half or more to imperial collectors. These crops were their lifeline, but also their chains, tying them to a cycle of labor and tribute that offered little mercy. Their greatest challenge was survival itself, a fight against forces both natural and human. Nature was a fickle ally. The monsoon rains, vital for the rice fields, could turn treacherous, swelling rivers like the Yellow River until they burst. Floodwaters swept through villages, dissolving mud homes and drowning crops in a muddy torrent. The smell of wet earth turned sour with loss as families salvaged what little remained. But then came drought, a silent thief. When the skies withheld their rains, the sun scorched the fields, cracking the soil into a patchwork of despair. Rice stalks withered, and the crunch of dry earth underfoot echoed the peasants' growing fear. And then there were the empire's demands. Tax collectors, clad in silk robes that mocked the peasants' tattered tunics, arrived with soldiers and scrolls, demanding grain regardless of the harvest's yield. A failed crop meant nothing to them. The emperor's armies and cities needed feeding. Failure to pay could bring fines, whippings, or the loss of land, but taxes were only part of the burden. In times of war, the empire called for men. Conscription tore sons and husbands from their villages, forcing them to march hundreds of kilometers to fight nomadic tribes like the Xiongnu. Women, elders, and children were left to tend the fields, their hands trembling with exhaustion. Many men never returned, their absence a wound that lingered in every village. Yet, amidst this hardship, the peasants found strength in their communities. Guided by Confucian values, they honored family and duty, believing their labor pleased the heavens. At dawn they burned incense at simple altars, praying to earth spirits for fertile fields. At night they gathered by firelight, the crackle of burning straw mingling with tales of gods and ancestors. These moments of connection were their refuge. Villages shared tools, seeds, and even meager meals when hunger struck. During the Lunar New Year, the scent of rice cakes filled the air, and lanterns cast a warm glow, offering brief respite from their toil. But then new threats emerged. Bandits, driven by desperation, prowled the countryside, stealing hidden grain under cover of night. Disease crept into villages, worsened by malnutrition and cold, the smell of medicinal herbs mingling with the groans of the sick. The peasants' lives were a delicate balance, each day a gamble between hope and disaster. A good harvest brought fleeting relief, but a bad one could mean starvation. Their hands, calloused and cracked, told stories of resilience, of planting seeds in faith, and rebuilding after floods. Their struggle was the heartbeat of the Han Dynasty. a testament to human endurance in a world that offered little mercy. Asterisk. The first great trial for peasants in the Han dynasty was the land itself, a fickle master that could nurture or destroy. Each spring, as green shoots pierced the soil, hope stirred in their hearts. They waded into rice paddies, the cool mud squelching between their toes, planting seeds with care under a sky heavy with promise. But nature was a treacherous ally. The monsoon rains, vital for their crops, could turn into a deluge. The Yellow River, both revered and feared, would swell with a roar, its muddy waters surging over embankments. Fields drowned in moments, and villages followed, mud homes dissolving into the flood. The air grew thick with the sour stench of wet earth, as families salvaged scraps of their ruined harvests, their hands trembling with despair. Months of labor vanished in a single night, leaving behind only sodden fields and shattered hopes. But then came drought, a silent and relentless foe. When the heavens withheld their rains, the sun scorched the earth, baking it into a cracked, barren wasteland. Rice stalks withered to brittle husks, and the crunch of dry soil underfoot echoed like a warning. Peasants watched, helpless, as their crops turned to dust, their dreams of plenty fading with each parched day. The fields, once vibrant with green, but became a graveyard of broken stems. Without crops, there was no food for their families, no grain to offer as tribute. Hunger crept into their homes, a constant guest, as children's cries pierced the quiet nights, their bellies empty. Mothers boiled roots and weeds, the bitter steam rising from pots, a faint facetious, "No, I'm sorry, I meant to continue the script. Let's keep going." The empire's demands added another layer of cruelty. Tax collectors clad in silk robes that mocked the peasants' tattered tunics arrived with soldiers and scrolls, their boots thudding on the village paths. They demanded grain half the harvest or more regardless of the year's yield. A failed crop meant nothing to them. The emperor's armies and cities needed feeding. Peasants who couldn't pay faced dire consequences: fines, public whippings, or the loss of their land. The collectors' voices were cold, their lists unyielding, and the weight of their demands pressed harder than the drought. A family might scrape together every last grain, only to see it carted away, leaving their granaries bare. The smell of dust and fear hung heavy as they pleaded for mercy, but mercy was scarce. And then came the bandits. Desperation bred lawlessness, and groups of outcasts roamed the countryside, their shadows long in the twilight. They struck at night, slipping into villages to steal hidden sacks of grain, their footsteps muffled but menacing. The creak of a door or the snap of a twig could send hearts racing, as peasants guarded their meager stores with makeshift weapons. A single raid could strip a family of their last hope, leaving them to face the winter with nothing. The air grew sharp with the acrid scent of fear, as neighbors whispered of attacks in nearby villages, their voices low and tense. This cycle of nature's wrath and human greed was unending. Floods swept away their work, droughts starved their fields, taxes drained their stores. Bandits took what remained. Each day was a gamble, a fragile balance between survival and ruin. The peasants' hands, rough and calloused, dug into the earth with stubborn resolve, planting seeds in faith despite the odds. Their lives were a testament to endurance, a quiet defiance against a world that seemed to conspire against them. They rose each dawn, the horizon glowing faintly, and returned to the fields, driven by the need to feed their families and honor their ancestors. Yet, the land offered no promises, and the empire gave no reprieve, making every step a battle against despair. Meet Wei, a peasant from a village nestled along the Yellow River's banks, his hands broad and calloused from years of toil. At 30, his face was etched with lines deeper than his age, weathered by sun and sorrow. He lived in a modest mud home, its thatched roof sagging under the weight of time. With his wife May and their 2 young children, Wei rose before dawn, walking 2 kilometers to his leased plot, a wooden hoe slung over his shoulder. The field wasn't his, but he worked it with a devotion born of necessity. Knowing his family's survival hung on every seed he planted that year, the rains failed. The rice paddies, which should have shimmered with water, lay cracked and dry under a merciless sun. Wei labored from dawn to dusk, digging channels to draw water from a distant stream, his back aching and his hands blistered. The earth drank the water greedily, leaving little for the crops. Each night he trudged home, his feet caked with dust, greeted by the soft whimpers of his hungry children. May stretched their dwindling millet with roots, the steam from her pot carrying a faint, bitter scent. The granary, a small shed of weathered wood, grew emptier each day, its shadows a silent accusation. Then the tax collectors arrived, their silk robes a stark contrast to the villagers' poverty. Their boots crunched on the dry earth, and their voices carried the weight of imperial authority. They demanded 3 sacks of rice, a quota Wei couldn't meet. His harvest had shriveled, barely enough to feed his family. With a trembling voice he explained the drought's toll, but the lead collector, eyes hard as stone, gave him 7 days to pay or lose his land. The air grew heavy with the threat, the faint smell of their horses' sweat mingling with Wei's fear that night, by the flickering light of a fire, its crackle the only sound, Wei sat sleepless. His children's thin faces haunted him, their hunger a knife in his heart. He made a desperate choice. The next dawn, he led his only ox, a loyal beast that had plowed his fields for years, 10 kilometers to the market. The road was dusty, the air thick with heat, and each step felt like a betrayal. Selling the ox brought a small sack of copper coins, a bitter trade for his family's lifeline. But when he returned, his heart sank. Bandits had struck while he was gone, their shadows slipping through the village like ghosts. They took the hidden grain, leaving only empty sacks and May's quiet sobs. The smell of dust and loss lingered as Wei held his family close, their warmth his only anchor. Yet, Wei did not break. The next morning, with hands that shook but refused to yield, he returned to the fields. He dug into the cracked earth, planting seeds for a future he couldn't see. His resolve was a quiet fire, fueled by love for his children and the memory of his ancestors. The distant hum of the village waking to another day spurred him on. Wei's story was one of countless others, a thread in the tapestry of peasant life, where every day was a fight to hold on, to survive, to hope against the brutal weight of the world. In the Han Dynasty, society was a rigid tapestry, woven with Confucian threads that bound every soul to their place. Peasants, at the bottom of this order, owed loyalty to landlords, officials, and the emperor, the son of heaven, whose divine will shaped their world. The air carried the faint scent of incense from village altars, where prayers rose for fertile fields and merciful skies. Confucian ideals demanded obedience, but also family and community, values that gave peasants strength. The gong's deep chime echoed through villages, calling families to honor ancestors, their spirits believed to watch over every plow and prayer. Villages were the heart of peasant life, small worlds of shared burdens and joys. Neighbors lent tools, traded seeds, and, in lean times, shared meager bowls of porridge, the steam carrying the faint warmth of millet. The Lunar New Year brought rare moments of relief, when the air filled with the sweet aroma of rice cakes and lanterns cast a golden glow. Yet, even these celebrations were shadowed by duty. The empire demanded corvée labor building canals, roads, or walls, pulling peasants from their fields for weeks. The sound of hammers and the dust of labor clung to them, a reminder of their place in the imperial order. Religion shaped their days as much as the land. Peasants burned incense at earthen altars, the smoke curling upward with prayers to earth and sky spirits. A good harvest was a divine gift, a failed one, a sign of celestial displeasure. A crow landing on a roof could spark whispers of bad omens, the air heavy with unease. These beliefs gave meaning to their struggles, but also added weight. A barren field was not just a personal failure, but a rift in the cosmic balance. The scent of burning herbs, meant to ward off sickness, mingled with the hope of better days. Community was their shield against hardship. When floods washed away homes, neighbors rebuilt together, their hands moving to the rhythm of old songs. They shared stories by firelight, the crackle of straw blending with tales of dragons and heroes. These moments were sacred, a refuge from the empire's demands and nature's cruelty. For Wei, the village was a lifeline, a place where a neighbor's kindness, a shared handful of grain, could mean another day of survival. Yet, their voices carried no weight in the emperor's courts. Their lives, bound by duty and tradition, were a quiet rebellion against a world that offered little mercy. Their unity, a spark in the darkness. Just when peasants thought droughts and taxes were their greatest trials, the empire's wars brought a new shadow. The Han Dynasty, ever expanding, faced rebellions within and Zhongnu nomads from the north to hold its borders. The emperor needed soldiers, and peasants were his quarry. Officials swept into villages, their boots pounding the earth, scrolls in hand listing names of men young and old torn from their fields. They marched hundreds of kilometers to distant camps, leaving wives, children, and elders to tend the land. The air carried the dust of their departure, and the faint wail of families left behind echoed through the villages. And then winter descended, a silent, piercing enemy. Temperatures plunged below 0 degrees Celsius, freezing streams and coating paths in ice that cracked under bare feet. Mud brick homes, poorly sealed, let in the biting wind, chilling bones through threadbare blankets. Peasants burnt straw for warmth, the smoke sharp and stinging in their lungs, without men to gather wood or mend roofs. Families shivered through endless nights, their breath visible in the dim light. Hunger tightened its grip, as granaries stood nearly empty, the faint smell of mildew clinging to the last scraps of grain. Each dawn brought no relief, only the weight of survival. The absence of men left fields untended. Women like May and children, as young as 7, took up hoes, their hands trembling against frozen soil. The earth was unyielding, the clink of tools against ice a futile sound. But then came disease, creeping through weakened villages. Without doctors or costly herbs, a fever could become a death sentence. The air grew thick with the scent of burning herbs, meant to drive away sickness, but the groans of the ill persisted. Villages fell quiet, save for the coughs of the sick and the soft cries of those who watched over them. helpless against the cold and hunger. And then bandits grew bolder. Driven by the same desperation as the peasants, they struck under cover of night, their shadows flickering in the moonlight. The creak of a gate or the snap of a branch sent hearts racing, as families clutched sticks to guard their stores. A single raid could strip a village bare, leaving only empty sacks and despair. The smell of dust and fear lingered, as whispers of nearby attacks spread. These new trials, war, winter, sickness, and theft piled upon the old, testing the peasants' spirit. Yet they rose each morning, driven by love and duty, their hands gripping tools with a resolve that defied the brutal world around them. Lian was 18, her hands strong and her eyes fierce with resolve, living in a village at the base of a hill. Her father had been conscripted into the emperor's army months ago, leaving her to care for her ailing mother and 2 younger brothers. Their mud brick home was small, its air heavy with the faint scent of mildew and worry. Each dawn, before the sun breached the horizon, Lian walked 3 kilometers to their leased field, a hoe over her shoulder, her breath clouding in the frigid air. The fields were her burden now, and she bore it with a quiet strength, knowing her family's survival rested on her calloused hands. That winter was merciless, the cold sinking into her bones. Snow blanketed the fields, and the wind cut through her thin hemp tunic, sharp as a blade. Lian spent hours breaking ice in irrigation channels, her hands raw and bleeding, but the frozen soil resisted her efforts. The clink of her hoe against the ground was a hollow sound, yielding little. At night, she returned to find her brothers huddled by a weak fire, its faint crackle barely warming their thin frames. She boiled roots and a handful of millet into a thin soup, its bitter steam filling the air, but it couldn't quiet their hunger. Her brothers, too young to grasp the depth of their plight, asked when their father would return. Lian forced a smile, promising better days, though her heart ached with doubt. Then came the news, carried by a weary messenger on a dust-covered horse. Her father had fallen in a skirmish against the Zhongnu, far in the northern wastes. The words hit like a stone, but Lian had no time to grieve. The fields needed tending, her brothers needed feeding, and bandits had been spotted nearby. The air grew tense with whispers, the smell of fear mingling with the dust. One night, footsteps echoed, outside their home. Lian gripped a wooden staff, her heart pounding, and stood guard at the door. The bandits passed, perhaps sensing her resolve, but sleep eluded her, the darkness heavy with dread. She kept watch until dawn, her eyes fixed on the horizon, guarding her family's fragile hope. Yet, Lian endured. She burned incense for her ancestors, the smoke curling upward with prayers for strength. She sang her mother's old songs, their melodies a faint comfort against the cold. Each morning she returned to the fields, her hands steady despite the weight of loss. She planted seeds in the frozen earth, a quiet act of defiance, driven by love for her brothers and the memory of her father. Her life was one of countless struggles, a single thread in the vast weave of peasant existence, where every day was a battle to protect what mattered most, to keep hope alive in a world that offered little mercy. Why was life so brutal for Han, dynasty peasants? The answer lies in a cruel convergence of nature, policy, and society. The land was their lifeblood, but it was unpredictable. The Yellow River, called China's sorrow, could flood with a roar, washing away crops and homes. In a muddy deluge, the air turned sour with the stench of loss, as fields drowned, but then drought struck, the sun baking the earth into a cracked, barren waste. Rice and millet withered, and the crunch of dry soil underfoot mocked their efforts. Without crops, there was no food, no tribute, only hunger's sharp bite. The peasants' tools were simple wooden hoes, worn plows leaving them at the mercy of the skies, their prayers to earth spirits often unanswered. The empire's policies were equally unforgiving. The land belonged to nobles or the emperor, and peasants were tenants, bound to pay half their harvest in taxes. Collectors, their silk robes, a stark contrast to peasant rags, demanded grain even in lean years. The smell of their horses' sweat filled the air as they enforced quotas with cold precision. Failure meant fines, beatings, or losing the land they worked. But then came conscription, tearing men from villages to fight distant wars. The absence of husbands and sons left fields fallow, women and children struggling to fill the gap. The empire's hunger for grain and soldiers was insatiable, its demands a weight that crushed the spirit. Confucianism shaped their world, a philosophy of order and duty. Peasants were taught to accept their place, to labor without question, their lives a humble offering to the Son of Heaven. Yet it also fostered community, a lifeline in dark times. Villages shared tools, grain, and stories, their fires crackling with tales of gods and heroes. When floods or bandits struck, neighbors rebuilt together, their hands moving to the rhythm of old songs. This unity, born of necessity, was their strength. For Wei and Lian it meant a shared bowl of porridge, a neighbor's help in the fields, a moment of warmth against the cold. These hardships left lasting marks. Floods and droughts weakened villages, but also spurred innovation-tourist fields, better irrigation. Conscription and taxes drained their strength, but taught them resilience, a stubborn will to endure. Their struggles shaped the Han dynasty, their labor the foundation of its glory. Their lives, though brutal, were a testament to human endurance, a quiet defiance that echoed through centuries, proving that even in the face of relentless hardship, the human spirit could find ways to survive, to rebuild, to hope. Asterisk if these stories of the past pull you in, subscribe if you like the video, and keep exploring with us. Asterisk in the year 184 after Christ, the peasants' suffering erupted into the Yellow Turban Rebellion, a desperate cry against decades of hardship. The air was thick with the dust of marching feet and the acrid scent of rebellion. Droughts had starved the fields, taxes had drained their granaries, and conscription had torn families apart. The Yellow River, once a lifeline, lay sluggish, its banks cracked and dry. Villages were gaunt, their air heavy with hunger's weight. Then Zhengju, a charismatic healer, rose with a vision of a new world. His followers, clad in yellow turbans, symbolizing the earth's renewal, were peasants like Wei and Lian, their hands trading hoes for spears. The rebellion began as a whisper in the fields, but then it swelled into a roar, shaking the Han dynasty's foundations. The spark was a cascade of disasters. That year, rains failed again, leaving rice paddies as barren as stone. The sun scorched the earth, cracking it into a desolate mosaic. Hunger gnawed at every village, children's faces hollow, their cries piercing the night. But then came disease, a shadow creeping through weakened communities. Typhus or smallpox, none knew for sure, swept through, leaving bodies in its wake. The air reeked of burning herbs, a futile shield against sickness. Peasants already battered saw their prayers go unanswered, their faith in the emperor crumbling. Zhengju's words lit a fire, promising a world without taxes or hunger. Thousands joined him, their footsteps heavy on the dusty roads, their voices rising in defiance, and then they marched. From villages to towns, peasants wielded tools as weapons, their hands calloused but resolute. The clang of metal and the shouts of the desperate filled the valleys. The rebellion was more than a fight. It was a plea for dignity, a stand against a system that crushed them. But the empire struck back, its armies disciplined and merciless. Soldiers poured into the countryside, their armor glinting under the sun. Battles raged, the air thick with the smell of blood and ash. Fields once sown with rice became graves, the earth soaked with the cost of rebellion. Villages that sheltered rebels burned, their smoke rising like a bitter prayer. The Yellow Turban Rebellion was a breaking point, a climax of peasant suffering. It exposed the empire's cracks, weakening the Han dynasty's grip. Hundreds of thousands fell, their bodies scattered across fields they once tilled. The rebellion failed, crushed by imperial might, but its echo lingered. For peasants, it was a moment of raw defiance, a fleeting grasp at a better life. The air cleared, but the scars remained etched in the land and in the hearts of those who survived. Their struggle, though defeated, was a testament to their spirit, a cry that resonated through history, proving that even the humblest could shake an empire. Asterisk. Despite the brutal weight of their lives, Han dynasty peasants found ways to endure. Their villages were bastions of shared strength, where neighbors traded tools, seeds, and hope. When floods swept away homes, they rebuilt together, their hands moving to the rhythm of old songs. The air carried the earthy scent of freshly turned soil as they dug irrigation channels, pooling their labor to coax water from distant streams. These canals, born of sweat and unity, saved fields from drought's grip. The crackle of communal fires warmed their nights as they shared stories and meager meals. Their voices a quiet defiance against hardship, they adapted with ingenuity, learning to terrace hillsides to shield crops from floods. Manure became fertilizer, turning waste into life for the fields. In winter's bite, when temperatures fell below 0 degrees Celsius, they built shared shelters, huddling around fires that crackled with straw and hope. The faint scent of smoke clung to their clothes, a reminder of warmth won through effort. These shelters were more than refuge, they were bonds forged in adversity, where laughter and tales of ancestors pushed back the cold. Each shared bowl of porridge, each mended roof, was a victory over a world that sought to break them. Rituals were their anchor. Each spring they burned incense at earthen altars, the smoke curling upward with prayers for rain. The air grew heavy with the scent of hope, as they honored earth's spirits to bless their fields. A crow's shadow could spark fear, but their songs and stories, passed down through generations, lifted their spirits. For Wei, Lian, and Bo, these moments were a haven, a shield against the empire's demands and nature's wrath. The gong's chime called them to honor ancestors, their spirits believed to guide every plow and prayer. These acts, though small, gave meaning to their endless toil. The Yellow Turban Rebellion, though crushed, left a legacy. Villagers learned to negotiate with officials, pleading for fairer taxes. They built hidden granaries to guard against bandits, the air thick with the dust of their secrecy. Their resilience turned suffering into strength, their hands shaping a future from the ashes of loss. They planted seeds in defiance, their labor a testament to their spirit. The faint hum of village life, children's laughter, the clink of hoes carried on, a quiet rebellion against a brutal world, proving that even in hardship they could build, endure, and hope. Asterisk, the struggles of Han Dynasty peasants, though centuries-old, ripple into our modern world. Their lives are mirror to our own battles. Picture Wei's calloused hands, gripping a wooden hoe in cracked fields, or Lian's resolute steps through snow, her breath clouding in the frigid air. Imagine Bo's quiet love for Zhu, a spark in the darkness of his loss. Their world that drowned their rice paddies, droughts that withered their millet, imperial taxes that drained their granaries feels not so distant when we face our own storms. Climate shifts flood our coasts or parch our lands. Economic pressures squeeze our livelihoods, and fractured communities struggle to hold fast. The air they breathed, heavy with dust and fear, carries an echo in our own moments of uncertainty. When the ground beneath us feels unsteady, today, rural communities face trials that parallel those ancient fields. Floods sweep away homes, leaving families to salvage what remains, just as Wei waded through muddy waters to save his crops. Droughts parch farmlands, crops wilting under a relentless sun. Much like the cracked earth that mocked Lian's efforts, systems, governments, corporations demand more than they give, their weight as crushing as the tax collector's scrolls. Yet, like the peasants, we adapt. We develop drought-resistant crops, build flood barriers, and form collectives to share resources. The crackle of their communal fires lives in our community centers, where we gather to plan, to support, to rebuild. Their Lunar New Year, with its rice cakes and lanterns casting a golden glow, finds echo in our festivals, where music and laughter push back despair. Their unity, born of necessity, inspires our own neighbors, helping neighbors, hands joining to lift the fallen, voices weaving bonds against the dark. Their resilience teaches us gratitude for the small things. They toiled with wooden tools, facing a world of few promises, yet found joy in shared meals, in stories by firelight, in children's laughter like Zhu's. We, with our technology and networks, can learn from their stubborn hope. When we face our own floods, literal or figurative, their planting of seeds in defiance reminds us to keep going. Their hands, cracked but steady, show us how to rebuild after loss, to hold fast to those we love. The distant hum of their villages, their songs against the night, urge us to find light in our own darkness. Their prayers, rising with incense smoke, echo in our hopes for better days. Our rituals to make sense of a chaotic world. Their lives, though brutal, teach us that endurance is not just survival, but a quiet rebellion, a refusal to let hardship extinguish the human spirit. Asterisk, in the Han Dynasty, tradition was both a comfort and a chain for peasants, binding their lives to the rhythms, to the land and the emperor's will. The air carried the faint scent of incense, curling upward from village altars where families prayed for fertile fields. Confucian ideals wove through every aspect of their existence, demanding loyalty to family, community, and the Son of Heaven. The deep chime of a gong echoed at dawn, calling villagers to honor ancestors whose spirits were believed to guide each plow, each harvest. These rituals gave meaning to their toil, a sense that their labor was part of a cosmic order, but they also tethered them to a system that demanded unrelenting obedience, their hands forever bound to the earth. Villages were small worlds of shared burdens, where neighbors traded tools and stories under starlit skies. The scent of burning straw filled the air as families gathered around fires, their crackle mingling with songs of dragons and heroes. When floods struck, washing away homes, the community rebuilt together, their hands moving to the rhythm of old chants. But then the empire's demands tightened their chains. Corvée labor pulled men from their fields to build canals or walls, their backs bending under the weight of imperial projects hundreds of kilometers away. The dust of their labor clung to their skin, the clatter of hammers a reminder of their place. Women like Lian took up the hoes, their hands raw, while children carried water, their small frames trembling under heavy buckets. Tradition also meant rigid roles. Men plowed, women wove, and children learned early to contribute. The air grew heavy with the must of hemp as women spun cloth by firelight, their fingers aching but never still. These roles, though confining, fostered unity. A shared meal, though meager, was a ritual of survival, its faint steam carrying the warmth of millet porridge. But then came the weight of expectation. A failed harvest wasn't just hunger, it was a failure to honor ancestors, a crack in the cosmic balance. The crow's shadow on a roof could spark fear, the air thick with whispers of ill omens. Peasants burned herbs to ward off spirits, the acrid scent mingling with their prayers. Their hope a fragile shield against despair. For Wei, tradition was a lifeline and a burden. He taught his children to bow before the altar, the smoke of incense curling around their small faces. But he also felt the weight of duty to his family, his village, his emperor. When conscription took him, he marched with pride for his ancestors, but his heart ached for Mei and their children, left to face the fields alone. The distant hum of village life, the clink of tools, kept their spirits alive, but tradition offered no mercy when floods or droughts struck. Their resilience, rooted in shared rituals and communal bonds, was a quiet rebellion against a world that demanded everything. their hands and hearts holding fast to hope. Asterisk. War was a shadow that loomed over Han Dynasty peasants, its weight as crushing as any flood. The empire, sprawling and ambitious, faced threats from Zhongnu nomads in the north and rebels within its borders. To defend its glory, it turned to the peasants, their sons and husbands conscripted into armies that marched far from home. The air grew heavy with dust as officials stormed villages, their boots thudding, scrolls listing names of men torn from their fields. Families stood in silence, the faint wail of farewells echoing, as men walked hundreds of kilometers to camps, their hoes replaced by spears, their hearts heavy with fear of never returning. But then winter deepened the wound. Temperatures fell below 0 degrees Celsius, freezing streams and coating paths in ice that cracked under bare feet. Without men, villages struggled. Women like Lian and elders like Bo took up the plows, their hands raw against frozen soil. The clink of tools was futile, the earth unyielding. Granaries dwindled, the faint smell of mildew clinging to the last grains. Hunger became a constant guest, children's cries piercing the night, their faces gaunt in the dim firelight. Mothers, boiled roots, the bitter steam rising, but it couldn't fill empty bellies. The air grew sharp with the scent of burning straw, a desperate attempt to keep warm in mud-brick homes that let in the wind. And then disease followed war's shadow. Weakened by hunger and cold, villagers fell to fevers, their groans filling the air alongside the scent of herbs burned to ward off sickness. Without doctors, a cough could become a death sentence. The silence of villages, once alive with chatter, was broken only by the cries of the bereaved. But then bandits grew bolder, thriving in the chaos of war. They struck at night, their shadows flickering in the moonlight, stealing what little grain remained. The creak of a gate sent hearts racing, as families clutched sticks to guard their stores. A single raid could leave a village bare, the dust of their retreat mingling with despair. The air heavy with loss. For Wei War was a thief. Conscripted, he marched north, the cold biting his bones, the clang of armor a constant reminder of his distance from Mei. Back home, she faced the fields alone, her hands blistered, her heart aching for his return. The village rallied neighbors, sharing what little they had, their fires crackling with stories of hope. But the cost of war was relentless, stripping families of their strength, their men, their future. Each dawn, peasants rose, their hands gripping tools with stubborn resolve, their voices singing against the dark, a quiet defiance against a world that took everything but their spirit. Asterisk. Meet Zhao, a widow of 40, her hands toughened by years of weaving hemp and tending fields. She lived in a village nestled between rice paddies, her mud brick home small but warm, the air carrying the faint must of straw. Her husband died in a flood years ago, leaving her with 3 children, 2 sons, now conscripted, and 14. Daughter Chen Zhao rose each dawn, walking for kilometers to their leased plot, her hoe heavy but her step steady. The distant hum of the village, the soft clink of tools, kept her grounded. But the absence of her sons was a wound that never healed, their laughter a memory fading like morning mist. That year, drought gripped the land. The sun scorched the fields, cracking the earth into a jagged mosaic. Zhao labored under its glare, her hands blistered, digging channels to draw water from a dwindling stream. The air was thick with dust, the faint scent of dying rice a constant reminder of loss. At night, she returned to Chen, who wove cloth by firelight, her fingers nimble but her eyes heavy with worry. They shared a thin porridge, its steam bitter, stretching their last grains of millet. The granary, a shed of weathered wood, stood nearly empty, its shadows lengthening like a threat. Zhao's heart ached, but she sang old songs to Chen, their melodies a faint shield against hunger. Then the tax collectors arrived, their silk robes a cruel mockery of the village's poverty. Their boots crunched on the dry earth, demanding 4 sacks of rice. Zhao's harvest was a fraction of that, her fields barren, she pleaded, her voice trembling, but the collectors gave her 10 days to pay or lose her land. The air grew heavy with the smell of their horses and her fear. Desperate, Zhao sold her husband's old plow, walking 8 kilometers to the market, the coins cold in her hand but not enough. Returning home, she found bandits had struck, taking their hidden grain. The air carried the dust of their retreat, Chen's sobs echoing in the silence, the faint scent of loss clinging like a shadow. Yet Zhao endured. She burned incense for her ancestors, the smoke curling with prayers for strength. She taught Chen to plant seeds in the cracked earth, their hands moving together, a quiet act of defiance. The village rallied, neighbors sharing a handful of millet, their fires crackling with stories of hope. Giao's sacrifice, her plow, her sons, her dreams, was one of countless others, a thread in the peasant's weave. Each dawn she rose, driven by love for Chen, her hand steady despite the weight of loss, her heart a fire that burned against the brutal world, refusing to let hope die. Asterisk. The land was the peasant's lifeblood, but it could turn traitor without warning. Each spring, they planted rice with care, the cool mud squelching between their toes, hope flickering under a sky heavy with promise. The air carried the fresh scent of turned earth, the distant hum of village life a reminder of shared dreams. But nature was a fickle ally. The monsoon rains, vital for their crops, could swell into a deluge. The yellow river roared, its muddy waters bursting over embankments, drowning fields in moments. Mud brick homes collapsed, the air thick with the sour stench of soaked earth. Families waded through knee-deep water, salvaging scraps, their hands trembling with cold and loss. Months of labor vanished, leaving only despair in the task of rebuilding. But then drought came, a silent, relentless foe. When the heavens withheld their rains, the sun scorched the earth, baking it into a cracked wasteland. Rice withered, millet turned to dust, the crunch of dry soil underfoot mocking their efforts. The fields, once vibrant, became a graveyard of broken stems. Hunger crept into homes, children's cries piercing the night, their faces gaunt. Mothers boiled roots, the bitter steam rising, a faint reminder of lost harvests. Granaries stood empty, the faint smell of mildew clinging to their walls. The air grew heavy with dust, the distant clatter of carts, a hollow echo of better days. As peasants watched their dreams fade with each parched dawn, and then the land demanded more. Earthquakes, though rare, shook villages, cracking mud walls and toppling altars, the air filled with the dust of collapse, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Families huddled, praying to earth spirits, the faint scent of incense their only comfort. But then pests followed, locusts descending in clouds, their buzz a deafening omen. They stripped fields bare, leaving only stalks and despair. The air grew thick with the hum of wings, the smell of devastation lingering. Peasants fought with fire and nets, their hands blistered, but the locusts were relentless, a plague that turned hope to ash. For Jiao, the land's betrayal was personal. Her fields worked with Chen, lay barren after a drought, then a flood. She dug channels until her hands bled, the air heavy with dust and loss. The village shared what little they had, their fires crackling with stories of survival. But the land offered no mercy, its cycles a test of endurance. Each dawn Zhao planted seeds, her hand steady, her heart defiant. Her struggle, like waves and lions, was a thread in the peasants' tapestry. Their labor a quiet rebellion against a world that took everything. Their hope a fire that burned through the darkest days. Asterisk. If these stories of ancient struggles pull you in, subscribe if you like the video and keep exploring with us. Asterisk. Loyalty to the emperor was a cornerstone of Han Dynasty life. But for peasants, it was a heavy yoke. Confucian teachings demanded obedience to the Son of Heaven, whose divine mandate justified their toil. The air carried the scent of incense from altars where peasants prayed for the emperor's favor, their hands folded in reverence. But loyalty came at a cost. Taxes claimed half their harvest, collectors arriving with silk robes and cold eyes, their boots crunching on village paths. The air grew heavy with the smell of their horses, as they demanded rice and millet, heedless of drought or flood. A family's survival hung on their ability to pay, their granaries left bare. The faint must of empty sheds a constant reminder of their sacrifice, and then conscription deepened the price. The empire's wars against Zhongnu nomads or rebels required men, and villages were stripped of their sons. Officials tore fathers like way from their fields, forcing them to march hundreds of kilometers to battlefields. The air was thick with dust, the faint wail of families echoing as men disappeared. Women and children took up the plows, their hands raw, their backs aching under the weight of new burdens. The clink of hoes against frozen soil was a futile sound, the fields unyielding. Hunger followed, children's cries piercing the night, their faces gaunt in the dim firelight. The air carried the bitter steam of boiled roots, a poor substitute for lost harvests. But then loyalty demanded more. Corvée labor pulled peasants to build imperial projects, canals, roads, walls far from home. The dust of their labor clung to their skin, the clatter of hammers a reminder of their place. Families like Jiao's struggled, her sons gone, her daughter Chen weaving cloth to trade for grain. The air grew heavy with the must of hemp, their hands never still. Yet loyalty also bound them to their villages. Neighbors shared what little they had, their fires crackling with stories of duty and hope. When bandits struck, stealing hidden grain, the community stood together, their voices a quiet defiance, the air thick with the dust of their resolve. For Bo, loyalty was a double-edged sword. He honored the emperor with prayers, but his heart was with Zhu, his only family. When rebels came, he shared his millet, torn between duty to the empire and compassion for their cause. The air carried the scent of his fire, the crackle a reminder of shared humanity. But when soldiers burned his home, loyalty offered no shield. He rebuilt, his hands steady, driven by love for Zhu. The peasants' loyalty was their strength and their burden, a thread in their brutal tapestry, their hands and hearts holding fast to hope against a world that demanded everything. Asterisk. Children in Han Dynasty. Villagers bore the weight of survival alongside their parents, their small hands thrust into labor too soon. At dawn, they walked kilometers to fields, carrying water in clay jars, the cool liquid sloshing against their sides. The air carried the fresh scent of turned earth, but their steps were heavy, their childhoods shaped by necessity. Boys like Chun's brothers learned to plow, their hands blistered on wooden hoes, while girls wove hemp, the musty smell filling their homes. The distant hum of village life, the clink of tools, was their lullaby, but play was a luxury stolen by hunger and duty. When men were conscripted, children filled the gap. The air grew thick with dust as they worked fields, their small frames trembling under heavy loads. Droughts left crops withered, the crunch of dry soil underfoot a constant reminder of loss. Families like Zhao's relied on children to gather roots, the bitter steam of their cooking rising in the air. But then floods came, the yellow river roaring, drowning fields and homes. Children waded through mud, salvaging what they could, their hands cold and trembling. The air was heavy with the sour stench of soaked earth, their efforts futile against nature's wrath, their small voices lost in the roar of the waters. And then disease struck, a shadow in weakened villages. Fevers took siblings, the air thick with the scent of burning herbs, a desperate shield against sickness. Children like Zhu cared for the ill, their hands gentle but their hearts heavy with fear. The silence of villages, once alive with chatter, was broken by coughs and cries. But then bandits added to their burden, stealing grain under cover of night. Children stood guard with sticks, the creak of a gate sending their hearts racing, the air sharp with the dust of fear, their small acts of courage hiding grain. Fetching water were threads in the peasant's tapestry, their innocent sacrifice to survival. For Chen, the burden was crushing. With her brothers gone, she wove cloth until her fingers bled, the air heavy with hemp's musk. She helped Zhao plant seeds, their hands moving together in cracked fields, driven by love and duty. The village rallied, neighbors sharing stories by firelight, the crackle a reminder of their bond. Chen's childhood was a distant memory, her hands and heart shaped by hardship, her resolve a quiet fire. Her story, like Zhu's, was one of countless children, their labor a testament to resilience, their small hands holding fast to hope in a world that demanded everything. Asterisk, the seasons shaped the peasants' lives, each a chapter in their endless struggle. Spring brought hope, the air fresh with the scent of turned earth as they planted rice in paddies, the cool mud squelching between their toes. The distant hum of village life, the clink of hoes, carried dreams of a bountiful harvest. But then, the monsoon rains could betray them, swelling the yellow river until it roared, flooding fields and homes. The air grew heavy with the sour stench of soaked earth, as families salvaged scraps, their hands trembling with cold. Mud brick walls dissolved, the roar of water drowning their hopes, leaving only the task of rebuilding under a gray sky. Summer, wrought heat, the sun scorching fields, the air thick with dust. Peasants like Wei labored under its glare, their hands blistered, digging channels to draw water. But then drought struck, the earth cracking into a jagged mosaic. Rice withered, millet turned to dust, the crunch of dry soil underfoot a mockery of their efforts. Hunger crept into homes, children's cries piercing the night, their faces gaunt. Mothers boiled roots, the bitter steam rising, a faint reminder of lost harvests. Granaries stood empty, the faint smell of mildew clinging to their walls, the air heavy with despair as families stretched their last grains. Autumn should have brought harvests, but locusts or storms often stole them. The air buzzed with wings, or rain battered crops, leaving fields bare. Peasants fought with nets and fire, the acrid scent of smoke their only defense, but the pests were relentless. But then winter sealed their fate, temperatures falling below 0 degrees Celsius, ice-coated paths, cracking under bare feet, and mud homes let in the biting wind. Families burned straw for warmth, the smoke stinging their lungs, the faint crackle of fires a meager comfort. Hunger tightened its grip, the air heavy with the must of empty granaries, children shivering in threadbare blankets. For Lian, the seasons were a cycle of hope and loss. She planted in spring, her hands steady, but floods or droughts stole her. Crops she wove cloth in winter, the air thick with hemp's musk, to trade for grain. The village rallied, neighbors sharing stories by firelight, their crackle a reminder of their bond. Each season tested her resolve, her hands and heart shaped by hardship. The distant clatter of carts, the soft songs of neighbors, kept her moving. Her struggle, like Zhao's and Bao's, was a thread in the peasants' tapestry. Their labor a quiet rebellion against a world that cycled through hope and despair. Their hope a fire that burned through the darkest seasons. The Yellow Turban Rebellion of 184 after Christ was a spark born of despair, but its spirit lingered in the peasants' hearts. The air was thick with dust and defiance as Zhongju's followers, clad in yellow turbans, rallied against taxes and hunger. Villages like Wei's buzzed with whispers, the faint scent of incense rising from altars where prayers for change mingled with fear. The rebellion failed, crushed by imperial armies, but its echo fueled a quiet resistance. Peasants learned to hide grain in secret pits, the air heavy with the dust of their digging, their hands steady despite the risk of soldiers' torches. But then the empire tightened its grip. Soldiers patrolled villages, their armor clinking, the air sharp with the smell of their horses. They burned homes suspected of aiding rebels, the roar of flames drowning out cries. Families like Bo's lost everything, the air thick with ash and loss, yet the spirit of rebellion persisted. Peasants negotiated with collectors, their voices low but firm, pleading for lighter taxes. The air carried the faint must of hidden granaries, a testament to their cunning. They shared stories by firelight, the crackle mingling with tales of defiance. Their words a quiet rebellion against a system that crushed them. And then new threats tested their resolve. Bandits, emboldened by chaos, struck more often, their shadows flickering in the moonlight. The creak of a gate sent hearts racing as families guarded their stores with sticks. The air grew heavy with fear, but villagers stood together, their hands joined in defiance. Disease followed, fevers sweeping through weakened communities, the air thick with the scent of burning herbs. Yet, peasants like Jr refused to break. She taught Chen to hide grain, their hands moving in secret, their hearts fueled by the rebellions. Spark, the distant hum of village life, the clink of tools, kept their spirits alive, a reminder of their shared strength. The rebellion's legacy was resilience. Peasants built stronger canals, their hands blistered but steady, to guard against floods. They wove tighter communities, their fires crackling with hope. For Lian, the rebellion's spirit was a fire in her heart, driving her to plant seeds in cracked fields, to sing songs of defiance. Her struggle, like Bao's and Jiao's, was a thread in the peasants' tapestry, their hands and hearts a quiet rebellion against a brutal world. The air carried the scent of their labor, their prayers, their hope, a testament to a spirit that refused to be crushed, even as the empire's weight bore down. Women like Mei, Lian, and Zhao were the backbone of Han Dynasty villages, their strength a quiet fire against hardship. When men were conscripted, women took up hoes, their hands raw against wooden handles, walking kilometers to fields. The air carried the fresh scent of turned earth. But their steps were heavy, their backs aching under the weight of survival. Mei plowed for Wei, her hands blistered. The distant hum of village life her only comfort. Lian, alone after her father's death, worked fields and wove cloth, the musty smell of hemp filling her home, her fingers never still despite the cold. But then nature tested their resolve. Floods roared through fields, the yellow river bursting, the air heavy with the sour stench of soaked earth. Women waded through mud, salvaging crops, their hands trembling with cold. Droughts followed, the sun scorching fields, the crunch of dry soil underfoot, a mockery of their efforts. Hunger gripped their families, children's cries piercing the night, their faces gaunt. Women boiled roots, the bitter steam rising, stretching meager grains to feed their own. The air grew thick with dust, the faint must of empty granaries a constant reminder of loss. Yet, they endured, their hands steady, their hearts fueled by love for their children, their villages, and then the empire's demands added to their burden. Tax collectors, their silk robes a cruel contrast, demanded grain, heedless of barren fields. Women like Jao pleaded, their voices trembling, but faced fines or worse. Corvée labor pulled them to repair canals, their hands blistered, the dust of their labor clinging to their skin. But then bandits struck, stealing hidden stores, the creak of a gate sending hearts racing. Women stood guard, their hands clutching, sticks the air sharp with fear. They hid grain in secret pits, their digging a quiet rebellion, their air heavy with the dust of their defiance. Their strength shone in community. Women shared meals, wove cloth together, their fires crackling with stories of survival. For Chen, her mother's hands were a guide, teaching her to plant, to weave, to endure. The air carried the scent of their labor, the clink of tools a testament to their resolve. Their lives, like those of Mei and Lian, were threads in the peasant's tapestry. Their hands and hearts a quiet rebellion against a world that demanded everything. Their strength, born of necessity, was a fire that burned through the darkest days. Their hope a beacon for their children, their villages, their future. Elders like Bo were the keepers of village wisdom, their gnarled hands and weathered faces a testament to decades of survival. In mud brick homes, the air heavy with the must of straw, they shared stories by firelight, the crackle mingling with tales of gods and ancestors. Their voices, low and steady, carried lessons of endurance, guiding younger hands like Chen's through fields and hardships. At dawn, they burned incense at altars, the smoke curling with prayers for rain, their eyes scanning the horizon for signs of hope. The distant hum of village life, the clink of tools, was a rhythm they knew well, a reminder of their role as anchors in a brutal world. But then nature struck without mercy. Floods roared through fields, the yellow river drowning crops and homes, the air thick with the sour stench of soaked earth. Elders like Bo led rebuilding efforts, their hands slow but steady, guiding neighbors to mend walls. Droughts followed, the sun cracking the earth, the crunch of dry soil underfoot a mockery of their wisdom. They taught younger villagers to dig channels, their hands blistered, the air heavy with dust. Hunger gripped their families, the faint must of empty granaries a constant reminder of loss. Yet, they shared what little they had, their fires crackling with stories of better days, their voices a shield against despair. And then the empire's demands tested their resolve. Tax collectors demanded grain, their boots crunching heedless. of barren fields. Elders pleaded, their voices steady but ignored, facing fines or worse. Conscription took their sons, leaving them to guide villagers alone, their hands trembling with age. But then bandits struck, stealing hidden stores, the creak of a gate sending hearts racing. Elders stood with younger villagers, their wisdom a weapon, teaching them to hide grain in secret pits, the air thick with the dust of their defiance. Disease followed, the air heavy with burning herbs, but their stories kept spirits alive, their hands steady despite the weight of loss. For Bo, wisdom was his gift to Zhu. He taught her to plant, to pray, to endure, his hands guiding hers in cracked fields. The village rallied, their fires crackling with his tales, the air carrying the scent of their hope. His life, like those of other elders, was a thread in the peasants' tapestry. Their wisdom a quiet rebellion against a world that took everything. Their hands gnarled but steady, their voices low but strong, were a fire that burned through the darkest days, their hope a beacon for the young, their villages, their future. Peasant life was a delicate balance, each day a tightrope walk between hope and ruin. Spring brought promise, the air fresh with the scent of turned earth as they planted rice, their hands steady in cool mud. The distant hum of village life, the clink of hoes, carried dreams of a bountiful harvest. But nature was unpredictable. Monsoon rains could swell the yellow river, flooding fields and homes, the air heavy with the sour stench of soaked earth. Families waded through mud, salvaging scraps, their hands trembling with cold. Mud brick walls dissolved, the roar of water drowning their hopes, leaving only the task of rebuilding under a gray sky. Summer's heat scorched fields, the air thick with dust, the crunch of dry soil underfoot, a mockery of their efforts. Droughts withered crops, hunger creeping into homes, children's cries piercing the night, mothers' boiled roots, the bitter steam rising, a faint reminder of lost harvests. But then autumn brought locusts, their buzz a deafening omen, stripping fields bare. Peasants fought with fire, the acrid scent of smoke their only defense, but the pests were relentless. Winters sealed their fate, temperatures falling below 0 degrees Celsius, ice coating paths, the air sharp with the sting of cold. Families burned straw, the crackle of fires a meager comfort, the must of empty granaries a constant threat. And then the empire's demands tipped the balance. Tax collectors, their silk robes a cruel contrast, demanded grain, heedless of barren fields. Conscription took men, leaving women and children to struggle, their hands raw against frozen soil. Bandits struck, the creak of a gate sending hearts racing, the air heavy with fear. Disease followed, the scent of burning herbs futile against fevers. Yet peasants like Wei Lian and Zhao held fast, their hands planting seeds in defiance, their voices singing against the dark. The village rallied, neighbors sharing meals, their fires crackling with stories of survival, the air carrying the scent of their hope. For Bo, the balance was fragile but vital. He taught Zhu to plant, to pray, their hands moving together in cracked fields. Each dawn, he rose, driven by love, his heart afire against the cold. The distant clatter of carts, the soft songs of neighbors kept him steady. His life, like those of countless others, was a thread in the peasants' tapestry, their labor a quiet rebellion against a world that teetered between hope and despair. Their hands and hearts held fast, their hope a beacon that burned through the darkest days, a testament to their endurance in a brutal world. The peasants' endurance was their greatest legacy, a quiet fire that burned through centuries. Their hands, calloused and steady, tilled fields despite floods and droughts, their hearts holding fast to hope. The air carried the scent of turned earth, the distant hum of village life, a testament to their resilience. They built canals to tame the yellow river, their hands blistered, the clink of shovels, a rhythm of defiance. When homes collapsed, they rebuilt together, the air thick with the dust of their labor, their voices weaving songs of survival. Each seed planted was a prayer, each harvest a victory against a world that offered little mercy. But then the empire's demands tested their strength. Taxes drained their granaries, collectors' boots crunching on village paths, the air heavy with the smell of their horses. Conscription took their sons, leaving women and children to plow, their hands raw against frozen soil. Bandits struck, the creak of a gate sending hearts racing, the air sharp with fear. Disease followed, the scent of burning herbs futile against fevers. Yet peasants like Wei Lian and Zhao endured, their hands planting seeds, their fires crackling with stories of hope. They hid grain in secret pits, the air thick with the dust of their defiance. Their resolve a quiet rebellion against a brutal system. Their innovations shaped the land. Terraced fields guarded against floods, irrigation channels saved crops from drought. The air carried the fresh scent of water flowing through their canals, a testament to their ingenuity. Villages grew stronger, their bonds forged in hardship, the crackle of communal fires a reminder of their unity. For Bo, endurance was his gift as you, teaching her to plant, to pray, to hold fast. The distant clatter of carts, the soft songs, of neighbors kept their spirits alive. Their lives, like those of countless others, were threads in the peasants' tapestry. Their labor the foundation of the Han dynasty's glory. Their legacy endures in history's echo. Their canals, their stories, their resilience, shaped a civilization, their hands leaving marks on the earth. The air carried the scent of their labor, their prayers, their hope a testament to their spirit. For Wei Lian, Zhao, and Bo, each dawn was a choice to endure, their hands and hearts a fire that burned through the darkest days. Their struggle, though brutal, was a beacon, proving that even the humblest could shape history. Their hope a quiet rebellion that echoed through centuries, a legacy of endurance that lives in us all. We've walked the rice paddies of ancient China, felt the weight of Wei's hoe, the fire in Lian's resolve, the love in Bao's care for Zhu. The Han dynasty peasants faced a brutal world floods that drowned their fields, droughts that starved them, taxes and wars that tore them apart. Yet their story is one of defiance, of hands that tilled the earth despite its cruelty, of hearts that held fast to hope. Each lost harvest, each frozen winter, each sacrifice, was a testament to their strength. Their fires burned against the dark, their songs a quiet rebellion, their lives the foundation of an empire's glory. Their lessons endure. They built canals, shared meals, wove communities from hardship. Their resilience teaches us to face our own trials, climate's wrath, life's demands with the same stubborn hope. Their hands, worn but steady, remind us to plant seeds for tomorrow, to rebuild after loss. Their voices, though faded by centuries, whisper in the fields they worked, in the songs they sang. They show us that even in brutality, humanity can shine, finding light in shared stories, in the warmth of family, in the courage to rise each dawn. Subscribe if you liked the video, and join me for more tales of the past. As their echoes fade, let the past cradle you. Picture the soft ripple of a stream, the crackle of a fire, the whisper of their songs on the wind. Rest, knowing their lessons linger, a reminder that we, too, can endure, can build, can hope. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with their stories. **